13th. This is a workshop for the planning board. We'll call this into order. And we're going to, who's starting this? The actual, on a workshop, do we do the
We can do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of Allegiance and all that?
Yeah,
okay.
all of it.
Let's stand for the Pledge of
Practice.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And you want to do roll call as well?
Yeah, sure. Roll call, please.
Member Hubbard?
Here.
Member Pletcher?
Here.
Member Secca?
Here.
Vice Chair DeAmpert?
Here.
Chair Premer?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good. This workshop is for the downtown core complete streets plan. Thank you for coming here today.
Of course. Hi, I'm Elena. I'm the city's transportation planner. I don't think I've had the pleasure of speaking with you all yet, but I'm going to talk today about the Downtown Core Complete Streets project that we started working on about a year ago now, in December of 22. We started this project with Kimley Horn. It kind of focuses on the downtown core, which is our TC1, TC2, and CC1 zoning districts. So we are looking at the streets overall, trying to factor in connectivity and safety for pedestrians and everything that goes into a complete street. So the goals of the project are to identify potential safety improvements and connectivity enhancements, develop a multimodal network, and to have a list of implementable improvements by the end of it that we can utilize in this district. Today's objectives are, I want to just kind of fill you in on what's going on, and I'd like to get your feedback on what we've done so far, particularly on our street concepts. They're kind of a template that we can use throughout the area, and I'd like y'all's feedback on what y'all think of what we've done so far. So this is the focus area. It goes from 73rd to 77th, but only a small section of 77th on the east side. And let's see, what are complete streets? So complete streets are just, they're safe and convenient modes of travel. We're looking to prioritize safety. We're looking to emphasize safety, particularly for cyclists and motorists and people of all ages, so the elderly or families, anybody who might be traveling on a street. Make it more cohesive, not just for vehicles, but also including vehicles in the safety as well. Our project schedule, we started in December of 22. We worked through 2 community workshops so far and 2 stakeholder workshops to get resident feedback. And then we're finally at the point where we're kind of drafting these final recommendations. We're looking to take this to the commission probably around December or January of next year. What we've heard so far from the community. So we've heard particularly on local streets that they would like slower speeds or traffic calming, more 4-way stops on these local streets, particularly on Coquina Way in our project area. They were requesting more 4-way stops, more dedicated bike routes, bike and scooter parking, improved sidewalks, and then more on-street parking, which I think is an issue that kind of spans the whole of the island, but in this area too it came up. And then also something that was interesting that came up was more native landscaping. After the most recent hurricane, a lot of the landscaping got wiped out due to the salt water, so they were thinking more resilient landscaping that could stand the test of time. So one of the deliverables that Kimley Horn provided to us is a complete street toolkit, and so that is broken down into 6 different areas: the streetscape, the pedestrian, intersections and crossings, bicycle and micromobility, roadway and traffic calming, and then placemaking. They gave us a map that focuses all of those recommendations onto the project area. So most of our intersections need improvements. A lot of our sidewalks need improvements, things that you would expect to see. But they also gave us some interesting ideas for placemaking and landscaping where we could add strategic complete streets ideas to really make the streets better for everybody. So now I want to go into the street concepts. That's the handout that I have for you. We tried to make templates that could be implemented on any of the streets in the area. So what I have for you is this concept for 73rd, Corey Avenue, and 75th. But you don't need to think of them in the context of just that street. Think of it more as like this idea could be implemented anywhere on any street that has a 60-foot right-of-way or an 80-foot right-of-way. So it's not necessarily that the plan will only be applied to Corey, or that we're looking to, you know, go out and take a shovel and start digging up the roadway and implementing this exact plan or anything. It's just a high-level concept. So the first one is 73rd. So our existing conditions on 73rd, we have 5-foot sidewalks on both sides, 12-foot travel lanes. We have some 90-degree parking that's existing in the right-of-way, so it's actually in the city right-of-way, though some people do have driveways and off-street parking. And then we have 36 existing parking spaces, but many of those block the sidewalks that exist. So the first option is a two-way street concept for 73rd Avenue. So this keeps it two-way like it is today, but it adds, it formalizes rather, the on-street parking that exists. And you can see that we actually gain 2 spaces by doing that. So we go from 36 to 38 spaces. We also ensure that those are up to code spaces, so there won't be cars hanging out into the roadway, or they won't be blocking the sidewalks. It'll improve mobility overall. The second option that we have is a one-way street. So we did a lot of asking around whenever we kind of started to propose this option to the community, and we've gotten generally favorable feedback, some negative, some positive, but overall it's been, people are curious about it, they're interested in it, and it seemed to be pretty well received. So this takes out, it reduces the travel lane to one 10-foot lane, adds more on-street parking, so we go from 36 spaces existing to 54 parking spaces on the roadway. And then we also gain, with this option, a bike lane, a two-way bike lane.
Nice.
So before I move on to Corey, do y'all have any comments on the 73rd Street concepts?
Have you talked with anybody who lives on 73rd as to the concept of the one-way street? I mean, adding that many parking spots seems like a no-brainer.
I'm not sure that we've had anybody from 73rd come to the meetings particularly, but in general, with the community that has shown up, they've been favorable to it.
Okay.
But definitely that would be something that we would reach out to the community on that street and see how they felt about it before we changed anything.
Absolutely. Okay.
It would also be part of one-way pairs, so 73rd, say it goes west, 72nd would go east, so that way you have a one-way pair going in both directions, which means we could probably gain more parking across all of those streets down to 68th if we formalized all of that right-of-way parking.
Are these residential units that are on either side of this?
Primarily residential on 73rd, yes.
Are you anticipating
Those are hotels.
carrying the same plan once adopted on both sides of Gulf Boulevard? I know if it's one way going,
Yeah.
carry it all the way through.
So this only looks at the 73rd from Gulf Boulevard to Sunset Way. So we wouldn't really be looking at doing it on the eastern side of Gulf Boulevard, just on the west side.
Does it make sense, even if you're not going to do it now, to continue that going, you know, our ultimate goal would be that's where it would go to in a future development phase?
Having it be one way all the way
Yeah.
down? Yeah, we could look into that.
Because otherwise you got people going, whichever way you're going to be going, getting to Gulf Boulevard and having to turn someplace.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. And then Corey Avenue was the next one we looked at. So currently on Corey Avenue, this is also just looking at from Gulf Boulevard to Sunset Way. So we aren't looking at this side of Corey Avenue. We have 5-foot sidewalks on both sides, but oftentimes vehicles block the sidewalks, so pedestrians end up walking in the streets. We actually have 18-foot travel lanes on that street, but it doesn't feel like it because the parking spaces, the vehicles hang over into the street so far. And we existing have 109 parking spaces. So the first option is a mix of parking. We looked at the context of Corey Avenue pretty closely, thinking about where businesses are located, what those businesses, what kind of uses they serve, where they might benefit from, you know, cafe dining space, or if they need as much parking, when do they need parking. So we came up with a mix of parking that has some parallel spaces, mostly angled spots, and does offer some cafe dining space to businesses that might be able to utilize it. And unfortunately, on Corey Avenue, the main thing is no matter what we do, we're going to lose parking because it's not up to code, the parking that's out there. So any changes we make, unless we just leave it exactly like it is today, you're going to lose some amount of parking spaces. So the second option for Corey Avenue is all parallel spaces, and this one is one in particular that we've heard from the community a lot that they don't think we need bike lanes on Corey Avenue because if we had bike lanes on 73rd or on 75th, you know, they could kind of circulate around. So this is one that it might not be applicable to Corey Avenue, but we've left it in here because maybe we could use it on 77th or on a different street in the project area. But we ended up with parallel parking, wider sidewalks, cafe dining space, and this takes us down to 46 parking spaces from 109. But we are adding a substantial amount of landscaping and green space and stuff like that. So any questions on Corey Avenue before we move on to 75th?
Yeah, I have one more question on all of these. Are you looking also at the current and future land use and by rights and what you can get with exemptions? Because a lot of these are smaller businesses that obviously the use of that property, they're underutilized today value-wise. Are you looking at them, okay, if some of those smaller multifamily, smaller residential get bought up, we go to two-story, bottom being retail, restaurant, that kind of stuff. Are you looking at your future so that we're not designing for today's use and we're looking down the road?
Kind of a mix. We did try to accommodate what's there now, but as far as like parking goes for those kind of structures, they would have to come up to code and provide off-street parking if they were to redevelop in a significant way.
I was specifically thinking about wider sidewalks, that kind of stuff for restaurants, because Corey could very easily become
All
a
restaurants.
pedestrian, you know, all the way through, and at some point, it may not have traffic. Who knows, you know, it's
Yeah.
a future time frame.
So would you suggest having the wider sidewalk continued throughout the whole stretch instead of it narrowing down to in certain areas?
It would seem we either address that today or put it in our plan
To have
in the
wider
future
sidewalk.
so that we could cut the roadway and add that additional space or something
In the future.
to make it so it's more, you know, pedestrian friendly.
Okay.
It would hurt to lose 50 parking spots.
Yeah, and that's the primary response that we've gotten is that that's a hard thing to overcome. But what we're hoping is that if we formalize the parking on 73rd through 68th and then on 76th and 77th, or 75th through 77th, or some on 77th, not very much, but we would be able to gain back some of that parking that we're losing on Corey. So that way, even though we're going to end up in the negative on Corey, hopefully we'll end up in the positive overall, providing more parking to the area in general.
Good.
And I do think it makes sense, Steve said you had the feedback from residents that as long as you're going to have the bike lanes on the other two streets, it's not necessary on that. I think that makes a lot of sense as well, because if we are encouraging more pedestrian walking, we probably don't want to have
Even more traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 75th was the last major street that we looked at for an overall concept. We saw an opportunity here to make this like something very unique that the city doesn't really have, since it is, you come over the Corey Causeway and it's right there. You know, it could be a gateway to the city if we were able to really improve the streetscape, make it look more lush and green, and, you know, show the city, show people, visitors, what the city could be or what it is. So our first option is it's pretty similar to what's out there today, which is parallel parking. We just add a lot of green space, we widen the sidewalks, and we added a green landscaped median. So it would provide kind of like a complete streets corridor for people to access that side of Sunset Way and 75th. We also add wider sidewalks, 8 feet on both sides. Existing, I think it's somewhere around like 5 or 6, and we add parking spaces as well by formalizing the parking. We also heard a lot of feedback about the buses being an issue on 75th, so we did add a formalized bus bay, so that way the buses can pull fully off the street and into the bus bay whenever they're loading and unloading.
How much parking do we have in the B of A parking lot that we contract for? And do we also contract for parking spaces in the PJ Shopping Center there? Do we contract for those also?
So we don't contract for the PJs one, no, but we have an agreement with Bank of America and Fit for Life, which is right next door. I think between the two, there's about 30 parking spaces that we utilize at different hours. So they set the hours that it's allowed to be used for the public. There was recently a shared use agreement approved by the commission maybe a couple weeks ago for the 2 empty lots on the one on the corner of Gulf Boulevard and 75th, and then the one just on the other side of Don't Tell Mama. And so those 2 lots are potentially looking into being shared use parking lots as well.
Oh, good, and that'll add considerable parking for that whole
Yes.
area.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, we're hoping.
Well, and I think too that it seems to me, and I know we don't like the word, but there's beautiful ones now. You can go anywhere, Naples, Sarasota. What is the minimum square footage that we would need to, maybe do a public-private partnership on a parking garage?
On a parking garage, yeah.
Because it seems to me that these are all short-term fixes, whether it's the shared property with the BOA or with that property on where the Christmas shop was. I mean, that's all just very, very short-term. We're giving up how many spaces for the bus to be able to have a place on our most, travel, desperately needed parking, so people can actually, and not have to walk 2 blocks, to go. I think that giving up, that prime property for a bus to be parked there is a lot. But has there any type of studies with parking garages for maybe that parcels that we own?
I can look into it for sure.
No, it just seems to me like long-term, we're going to need more
Absolutely,
parking.
absolutely.
And they have pretty ones.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't even know it was a parking garage.
Mhm.
But it just seems to me that would be kind of like, if we're looking to the future, maybe that's part of that transportation parking
Yeah.
element.
Wasn't there a discussion about the Green Church being a parking garage? I know
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But we were going to add a couple of parallel parking spaces like around the perimeter, but other than that, I'm not aware of any
Okay.
plans.
I know it was a while back.
Parking garage.
Been here too long.
And when you're doing it, also coordination with community development, also with a mixed use on a parking garage, because we could very easily probably pay for that parking garage by putting, leasing it out, have someone put retail on the first floor
Yeah.
and parking above it,
Yeah.
and pay for itself.
I don't know if any of these lots that are available to us would be large enough to have a reasonable parking garage constructed. They're fairly expensive, and they'd have to go pretty tall to get a reasonable capacity, so I don't know. If Don't Tell Mama was not there in the middle, that would be a great 1-block-long parking garage, but there's small lots. I don't know how you could build one there.
Yeah.
Well, I think offering it out in an RFP or something like that, to see if there's developers that are interested in that.
Sure.
And to be able to get it that way, and instead of, us making the determination, let the marketplace do the determination.
That's what Clearwater Beach did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what Madeira Beach did.
You're saying bad words again.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Parking garages,
North.
CW.
Don't we own the entire rest of the block
Library?
where the library is? Yeah, that's where my head is going.
Yeah.
That's where my head was going.
Yeah.
Which
I
is
mean,
perfect.
that's the perfect location for it, and I don't know if there's reasons that we can't look at that, but,
Where the library is?
yeah, so where the
Library
library is,
parking.
there's parking there, and then all the way down to the end of that entire block, is my understanding, we own
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
So it's sitting right behind Quarry Avenue.
Yeah.
Where
Where the shell lot is now.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, yeah. I'm not sure that we have enough, I'm not sure that we could accommodate a full-size parking garage unless we converted like the whole.
And I guess the question is, do we need a full-size parking?
Yeah.
garage? What do we need? I mean, on one hand, we're talking about doing a big parking garage. Do we really need the big parking garage? Or can we do something
Yes,
that's
we
just, I don't know, a couple of stories versus, or, a couple of levels of parking versus
If we
6
do
levels.
something and we look at that area where the library is, I think that's something we should include that library into that development plan.
Of
You know,
course.
Even though we just did a rehab on it, but if that was into the development plan and part of that parking garage, and we went vertical over the top of it, now all of a sudden you've got a full block, and you could convert the alleyway back there to a pedestrian alleyway, throughway with, and a lot of the frontage and the outside dining can occur back there in a pedestrian setting, and thus leave parking on Corey if we decided to, and not affect that.
We did throw the idea out there of a pedestrian alley, especially on the blocks of Corey that are more commercial. It generally didn't receive the most positive feedback. It wasn't particularly negative, but people weren't thrilled about it. So that was the feedback we got from the community, but. And then, so the last option we have for 75th is very similar to the one before. It just widens up the sidewalks a little bit, and rather than having the median, we included this option because there was some concern about access management for the various businesses, people having to do U-turns. So if you had a preference over having the median and people potentially having to navigate around those, or not having a median, we provided an option for both.
Just curiosity, has the block west of Gulf Boulevard on 75th and the block north of 75th where Gulf Boulevard continues, has there ever been a thought of converting either of those single blocks to one-way? I travel that every morning to drop my daughter off at school, and it's constantly, the light will stop and eliminate the flow of traffic into St. Pete Beach from 75th Avenue for one car to go through there. There's almost never more than one car trying to turn left or head south on that one block, and it just seemed to me, as I pass through there every day, that if either of those blocks were one way, since we're already talking about other streets potentially going one way, that might reduce the inefficiencies of the current flow.
Like having 75th be one way going to the west?
So you can come in 75th, you can go straight through, or you can turn left on Gulf Boulevard, but you can't, where those buses queue. The buses are most of the traffic that ever causes that light to change, so it seems like it's not really accomplishing much having eastbound.
We had a study in 2015, I believe it was, where blind pass was one way. It was the couplet, the dreaded couplet.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
And it went, so it was a series of one-way streets, but blind pass was straight through, so there was no turn.
Yeah.
So it was to eliminate that right, left turn, the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I know that was voted down. but-
Yeah, I mean, we still have the plans for it, but I think it was received pretty unfavorably by the community at the time.
So I think I'd like the idea of one-way streets.
Yeah, they definitely help us reclaim our right-of-way, and do what we can in the space that we have, since we're obviously not going to get more right-of-way than we already have, so.
Absolutely.
It helps us regain some of that space for other modes of travel rather than just vehicular travel.
Great.
Well, there were some benefits to that, too, is turning right on 74th, turning left on 75th, and then turning, when you're heading north,
Great.
and then, doing the other, just that one block rather than all of Blind Pass. I remember that being a big discussion, because then it would maybe help, the Corey Avenue businesses and,
Some of the
having
traffic,
people actually traverse on their street instead of just, ignoring it while they drive past.
And the plan was to leave Corey Avenue both ways, so that way people could navigate Corey Avenue easily without there being any,
Right.
issues with that. So that's all I have for you. Our next steps are really just to refine these concepts based on the feedback you all provided and the feedback we got from the community, and then we're planning on presenting to the commission in December or January. Do you all have any other comments for me before we wrap up?
I think your idea about a center median on 75th makes a lot of sense. One-way Corey makes a whole lot of sense, and the corresponding on that. But the one I had a question on in this that you didn't include was Sunset Way.
So we didn't include Sunset Way because there's already some plans going on there tied around the Fisherman's Park restoration. So there is plans for a raised median or raised intersection there at Sunset Way and Corey Avenue. And then we have design plans for a sidewalk that goes from Fisherman's Park down Sunset Way and onto 71st.
When you say raised intersection, what do you mean?
Kind of like a speed table, or it's like it's an intersection that is slightly elevated on all sides, so that way it acts like a giant speed bump. Essentially, it slows people down.
Gulf Boulevard has it.
But
North.
is there? I've never seen anybody speeding on Sunset Way. I mean, in that, because there's typically especially at Sunset. I mean, I live right around the corner of that.
Mhm.
The pedestrian traffic on that is huge.
Yes.
You know, at Sunset and if we add more parking and we do that kind of stuff, it would sure be nice to connect Sunset Way and the businesses there that are like-style businesses,
Mhm.
connect them together so that there's a lot more intermotion between the businesses
different
and on the
businesses.
street.
Mhm. I think the concept for the raised intersection was just to kind of force people to stop. A lot of people roll through that intersection, especially because of the amount of pedestrian traffic we have in that area. We just want to be sure that people are traveling slowly and being aware of their surroundings. Well, thank you so much for your time, and if y'all have any other questions or comments, feel free to email me, but also we have a survey online that's active. It'll probably be active for another couple of weeks, so if you have any residents who you think might be interested in providing feedback as well, we have a whole page on our website.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good.
Thanks,
Thank you
Elena.
very much. Does that conclude the workshop?
That does.
I believe there's a calendar, Ginny.
yeah.
Do we have to address the meeting
That's
calendar?
the next meeting.
Oh,
It's at 4 o'clock.
never mind. So yes, that does conclude the workshop.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Gives us a lot of food for thought, so we appreciate your input. So we'll call the workshop completed, and we are adjourned